Welcome to Final Fantasy Weekly. I'm Drew Kreisman.
And I'm Ira Kreisman.
And on this episode, we somberly continue our conversation on Final Fantasy VII. Our characters, without Aerith, when last we left them, they lost her. She's gone now. And there's this kind of long segment of the game that comes up next that I think is kind of built to let the player take a deep breath and do some dungeon crawling and look for items and materia and kind of sink into this cold northern wasteland and just kind of sit inside of it for a bit. As Cloud and whoever you've taken with you into the City of the Ancients, Barrett, Tifa, Red, whoever and company, are kind of gathering themselves and rededicating themselves to stopping Aerith. There's a couple of forward-going mission statements we have here, right? As we start Disc 2 also of the game. So there's this kind of, okay, what do we do now feeling? And Cloud says something about, there's a person inside of me, a person who is not really me. So we know, one, we've got to solve the mystery of what's going on with Cloud. Why does it seem that Sephiroth can control him sometimes? And what is this? Who is he really? We've had so many hints about this, and now Cloud is finally saying it out loud. There's something about me that I do not understand. So we know we've got to figure that out. And then about Aerith, came here to try to save the planet, to try to stop Sephiroth from his plan. And Cloud gets this sort of image and visions about heading to the North Cave, understanding that that's what we have to do next. That's where we need to go to confront Sephiroth. And so the party just heads north of the ancient city, or City of the Ancients, and just starts finding kind of desolate towns and places as they head toward I guess you'd call it the North Pole of this planet.
Right. Don't they call it the North Glacier?
Right. Great Northern Glacier.
We've talked before about how the maps of Final Fantasy behave like a donut sense. Instead of a globe.
Right.
Yeah. But clearly it's meant to be a globe because we've got a North Pole here. So yeah, our heroes go north, and there's a resort town here. We get we get to Aspen, I think, or maybe Vale.
Right. This feels very much like home, doesn't it? Seeing these cabins in the snow, sparsely populated towns. A lot of those out here in Colorado, and people just kind of living on whatever's around them, whatever they can gather, very sustainably in a lot of places. And up here, you find the Icicle Inn, aptly named, where travelers from afar can find a little bit of warmth and refuge. And
it's really presented as kind of a resort town. Like, this is where you go. This is like the staging area if you want to go climb the Northern Glacier, right? But it's not like they're just getting by, they're just surviving. No, like, people are thriving here. There are snowmen, and there are people sledding. And there, like you said, there's the Icicle Inn, and there's everything's very cozy, right? Like, this is a destination point. Maybe not for everybody, but for those who like outdoorsy activities,
Right.
If you want to go climb the glacier or the cliffs, or challenge the monsters in the frozen caves hereabouts, or even dare I say snowboard, this is where you go.
Yeah. There's a funny game mechanic for some of the dungeons as you're walking around here where you have to stop and tap on buttons, which I'm sure in the remake will be like shaking the controller with motion sensors and stuff to keep yourself warm, right? Which was another way. Final Fantasy VII was obsessed with its gameplay not just being whenever you enter battle. You've got all these mini games, and we think about the motorcycle and the snowboarding and all the stuff with the gold saucer, but there's all these little ones too, just having to stop and tap the button so you don't freeze to death on the cold mountain.
Or give the little girl CPR, or any of a number of other just tiny little mini games here and there.
So in wandering around this, basically the only point between where we were and where we need to get to, we very conveniently happen to find the exposition room of convenient documents and videotape.
This is the computer that contains all the video and dialogue that will explain many things that we may have had questions about. Not all the things, but enough of the things.
To be fair, yeah, it was about time we got a little bit of exposition about a couple of things. So as potentially haphazardly as this is introduced, it's certainly like you could see how in a normal world maybe your characters wouldn't stumble upon this at all.
Sure.
And this is some vital information to have.
And there's something to be said for how well kept this little cabin / laboratory / computer program is. Like, yeah, it's been 20 years or something since anybody lived here, and it's exactly as it was. I imagine in the remake, like somebody's got it in a box somewhere or something like that. Like this is a small enough town that people would not have just left this building abandoned for the last 20 years.
Right. All that having been said, if you get past the conceit of the way it's initially presented, and actually not the way it's presented, I'll say the way the characters stumble upon it. Because once you actually get to the files, right, and being able to look through the tape, this is actually pretty compellingly presented, I would say, in a pretty great way to fill us in on, like you said, some more, but not all of the backstory. And I think it's a really interesting time because most of this surrounds Aerith, who, it's pretty fascinating to provide backstory to a character who's just died. Further developing a character even after they've left your party for good. Pretty fascinating stuff. But you do find files labeled The Original Crisis, What is Weapon, Confidential, and you can start looking through these tapes. So the first thing that really what this is doing is introducing us officially now to characters we've heard about but never seen, Professor Gast and Ilfana.
Yeah, the only time we've seen Ilfana was in Elmira's memory, Aerith's adoptive mother.
Right, just dying there next to the train station. Right?
And we've heard of Gast because Sephiroth thinks that Gast was a far superior scientist to Hojo. And I think that's about it.
So what we and the party see on these, for some reason, recorded tapes are conversations between Professor Gast and the Cetra. I can't remember if it's official now. I got to play the remake again for that part.
I can't remember either.
Ilfana. And it's basically him just asking her questions about her ancient ancestors and their knowledge and what she knows about certain concepts, right? And one of the first things that they talk about is the Cetra having lived in this area up around the Great Northern Glacier now, but before it was like that they would have conversations with the planet. This is something where we're getting more and more into the planet kind of having its own willpower. In fact, that's where this, I think, is really nailed down, because she mentions, this is also the origin story, I guess, for Jenova, that something large fell from the sky, created a wound, and it took a very long time for the planet to heal, and that they were ready to leave. And this is something really disturbing. This is something appeared taking the image, the visage of their dead family members and friends.
Yeah, that's pretty upsetting.
So the Cetra eventually come up with a name for Jenova, the crisis or the calamity, depending on what version you're reading, what your translation is. What I like is that could even be in-game translations. It could go either way, right? The calamity from the sky.
Right.
This being that at first approached as a friend, but then ends up giving them this virus that transforms the Cetra into monsters, which makes me wonder how many of the random monsters that are just roaming the countryside in Gaia that we've killed are like former Cetra who, through no fault of their own, are like this because of it's kind of like the fiends in Final Fantasy X. Like it's oh man,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe they're descended of. It's sort of like the humans being turned into espers by the warring triad. That part's pretty disturbing. The fact that I think it's interesting that Jenova parallels Lavos, like we said when we were talking about Chrono Trigger, named by Isla's people.
Right.
Lavos, I can't remember what the direct translation was meant to be, but it's like the fire from the sky or the calamity from the sky. I think that's the imbalance of this world comes from outside this world is particularly interesting. I also like that Ilfana mentions that the calamity from the sky, Jenova, this alien infection, gave them a virus because that sort of hints at what's to come in Advent Children with geostigma.
That was the first thing I thought of when I read virus as well. I was like, ooh, when I had first played this game before all the compilation stuff, I maybe didn't pay as close attention to that word.
I wonder also if you do a quick thought experiment with me here. So in Final Fantasy VII, as we're describing it, there must be like a camera sort of off up in the corner of the room that's pointed down at the room, and you just see a man in a white jacket, Professor Gast, speaking to Ilfana, a woman with long brown hair and sort of a pink-red outfit. And they're just sort of standing in the model of, the computer-generated model of this PS1 game. I wonder, though, because this is like him recording his interviews with her.
Right.
Is this like, are they in an interrogation room? Or is this more documentary-like? Is it like, because you can see interviews set up, with a camera on the person asking the questions and a camera on the person answering. Is it going to be like, Decker?
Oh, that could be cool, yeah.
Blade Runner, like is it Decker interrogating the Reploids in Blade Runner, or is it more like 2020, where you've got Leslie Stahl interviewing whomever?
The other thing that I think we're supposed to fill in the gaps here, because I think it's supposed to kind of start more as one, and right and I think we're supposed to fill in those gaps ourselves, or at least it's blank enough that maybe I'm just making that up. But certainly we know by the end of it there's a relationship here, right? Because that's what we're going to get to. But I think that could be fleshed out really, really well, and exactly what you're talking about, a kind of faux documentary style thing where you see at first it's more him interrogating her, then him like hearing her stories, coming to understand her plight, the plight of her people, what's going on here, what's really at stake, that maybe the promised land isn't just some place with a whole bunch of energy we can use, that it's more of a concept, a state of mind, really. No.
Well, yeah, as she's explaining how you guys really don't understand what you're getting into, and as he starts buying into it, that's when he starts, developing an actual affection for this person, as opposed to, I'm sort of picturing those 70s spy films with a smoke-filled room, and he's got like the oversized glasses on and kind of Robert Redford-y.
Right.
And slowly she wins him over.
Right, and because it's so easy to, I think, drop Professor Gast as a good guy as opposed to Hojo, but he definitely has a lot of issues too. He does work for Shinra to begin with. He is out here agreeing to do certain things, and it seems like he has more of a change of heart than anything, right? So,
not unlike Final Fantasy VI's Sid, right? Right. After doing this work for a long time, you come to realize that you've lost your humanity. Like you said, we're sort of speculating and filling in the blanks. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this relationship is interpreted when we get into the more expansive remake.
Right. Especially once, hint, slight spoiler, foreshadowing for later, you start introducing Vincent into the mix and everything that goes on with all this stuff. And yeah, well, we'll get to all that later.
So, Drew, I have a question for you.
Yes?
What is weapon?
Right. So, as a part of this conversation, one of the things that Ilfana says, and this, I think, is the most agency the planet has been given at this point. She says the planet knew it had to destroy Jenova. We have now fully personified the planet. We've known it has like these kinds of whims, or this idea of everyone goes back to the planet, returns to the planet. It has a general desire for things to reach a certain balance. But this idea of it knew it had to destroy Jenova, it's got a very specific goal in mind. And I think that's really important, again, for a lot of the compilation stuff, especially as we're looking at Remake now and the will of the planet. And once we get to the end of the game, what does that mean? And it reminds me a lot of, we talked about it in Chrono Trigger, and there's some of this in Chrono Cross as well, about personifying the planet. And it's just a fascinating concept to me. It's obviously taken to like the nth degree here in Final Fantasy VII. It's like not subtle. It's clearly doing stuff. Because right here, it produces, as you asked, weapons, as they're called. We're not really told what they are in this moment, just that they're weapons of its own will, but that it never uses them.
Right. And I think this is particularly interesting. It never has to use weapons never have to be used because a small number of surviving Cetra defeated Jenova and confined it. And this is another parallel we've seen in other Final Fantasies, right? The Dawn Warriors of Final Fantasy V, right? Goluf and his buddies coming together to seal away the evil in the forest and basically turn Exdeath into a tree. Right. Like, that wasn't the goal, right? But you seal away the evil, and then the evil festers. So I thought that was... And that could be its own game, right? Let's see the Dawn Warriors of Final Fantasy VII, a small band of Cetra coming together to defeat Jenova.
Right. Absolutely. It's similar to the War of the Magi in Final Fantasy VI. You said they seal out the evil. That's the humans, right? The Espers seal out the evil by closing the door. And the humans on the other side of it. Yeah. And then there's no war between Espers and humans for 1,000 years. So.
Well, the humans and the gods.
Right. Totally right. And so, yeah, this idea now, we know, and we'll get into it more later, but just to talk about it here, that these are Final Fantasy VII's kaiju.
Yeah.
The great, big, gargantuan monsters of Gaia that are the manifestations of the will of the planet. And in my mind, they're of the beasts. Because we're always talking about, what happens to Cloud and Aerith and Zack and Tifa and Barret. What happens to them when they die? What happens to the people of the world? And they go into the life stream or whatever. What about like the animals and the, whatever? Maybe they become weapons, or maybe that's what it is. But somehow the planet uses the power of the life stream to manifest these gargantuan beasts that resemble those of the Godzilla universe, in a clear homage to that tradition in history.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the planet has been injured by this calamity from the sky, this Jenova alien being that fell upon it and created this huge, a physical gash in the planet, but also a metaphysical gash, right? And so in response, the planet creates its kaiju, but did not have to use them. And then Gast asks, so weapon no longer exists? And Elfana's like, well...
Yeah. She says they cannot vanish, remain asleep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So on that foreboding note, you can now move over and read what's called Daughter's Record.
Aww. Elfana has a daughter. I wonder who that is.
Yeah. And this line kills me when she says she has a face of an angel when she sleeps. And then they clear up any confusion about the parentage, as I think it's Gast says, daughter is both yours and mine. Mm-hmm. So it's okay. And I know they've been out there in this, cold mountain resort town, like you said, for who knows how long, isolated by themselves, And apparently one thing led to another.
Right. And we had our human, non-human crossover.
Right.
Though the difference between, as we've said, between Cetra and humans is not physical so much as spiritual, right? But yeah, Gast and Elfana developed a relationship and had a baby. And he is just so cute. Like, I want to record this and that, and I want to make sure that we, preserve, for memory what she was like as a child.
Yeah, and he says one thing that like really breaks my heart again because we just lost her, where he says, "I will protect her no matter what."
Oh, yes.
And he's like planning what her life is going to be like. And, you know, I didn't think about this when I was 11, but now that I'm 34, and the idea of like you're just starting a family and you're planning out what your daughter's life is going to be like. And one of the things probably isn't dies in her early 20s in this horrific way, right? And so it's just, again, so much heartbreaking after we've just left the moment. Yeah, it's brutal.
And then, Drew, there's a knock at the door.
Ay. Nothing like Hojo bursting in the room to ruin a nice moment and totally kill your buzz.
Right, him and his jackbooted Shinra soldiers.
Yeah, totally. Gives us a nice little exposition again to let us know that it's 2 years he's waited on them to... Okay, so now we know how long they've been up there.
Mm-hmm. And he refers to Aerith as his new sample.
Yeah. And we all throw up a little bit in our mouths. It also makes me wonder, you know, to what extent was that the plan from the beginning? Again, we've got to keep Professor Gast on the hot seat a little bit here as we continue to look through their story. But at this point, he does, at the very least in this moment, do the right thing, tries to sever all ties with Shinra, says, "I'm out, I'm not doing this anymore, you can't have my daughter," you know, the whole thing. Does, at least there's that, right?
Right.
But, as you mentioned, jackbooted thugs.
Yeah, and so I do have to wonder here, because Sephiroth knew Professor Gast, considered him a much better man and scientist than Hojo. So, you know, how old is Sephiroth? How much older is he then? How much of a relationship did he have with Gast? You know, is Gast responsible for the soldier experiments on Sephiroth and the rest of the soldiers? It's not made real clear here, but I have to, like you said, we got to keep him on the hot seat some. Like, he doesn't get a pass just because he's Aerith's biological father.
Right, totally. So, you know, at this point, the guards come in, they take the situation, they start to shoot out the camera, which, you know, nice touch. And we just hear, "Take Aerith and run," and then a bunch of gunfire suggesting that may well have been the end of Professor Gast. And of course, we know that Aerith and Ilfana would end up at that train station in Midgar eventually, and Aerith would spend a lot of time in the care of Shinra.
They have an apartment. I actually liked seeing their apartment in the remake.
I thought that was really cool. And she was like, "I lived here." I was like, of course you would have had to have lived somewhere. That really got me. Yeah.
Yeah. Because she's, what, 5 or 6 by the time...
Right.
Before she lives with Elmira. So, yeah, Ilfana got to raise her for 4 or 5 years, at least.
Right.
In Shinra Tower, but...
Right.
You know, it's better than nothing.
Totally. So we come back to real time, and then we get a little bit of what I'm going to call Final Fantasy VII's trying to give its fans a break.
Sure.
There's been so much drama and sadness, and even this was like a lot to take, right?
Right.
And so you've got a couple of comedic scenes back to back here that allow us a little breathing room. One is that Elena of the Turks shows up basically to try hard, doing what she does. Yeah. She's just trying hard.
She is.
Love her so much. You know, she comes after the gang, and there's this very silly little thing that happens where she goes to throw a punch at Cloud, and you just get to pick whatever direction you want, and you'll dodge it, and she'll just like roll down a snowy hillside, and you're just like,
right. Well, and she is upset at what you did to her boss, Sang.
Right.
Or, excuse me, Song, right?
Right.
And Cloud's like, "That wasn't us, that was Sephiroth." And she's like, "Don't you lie to me."
Yeah.
And he's like, "It was Sephiroth, we didn't do it."
Do anything. It's kind of amazing how much this group of super secret agents who do some terrible stuff is played for laughs. Effectively so.
Right. Well, and, you know, like we said, they're pretty sympathetic.
Right.
I like the way they're played in the remake, and I mean, when when Reno answers the phone and, oh yeah, y'all are looking for Cloud, and they say, so are we taking Cloud? And he's like, no, it's our day off.
Day off, man.
Like, that is one of the most relatable things
Yeah.
in Final Fantasy VII to me.
Yeah. Well, what about going and grabbing a map and then snowboarding down the mountain to get where you need to go?
Heck yeah. We're trying to make our way all the way to the northern crater now. So yeah, you gotta get the old ice climbers map off the wall. It's either at his place or it's at the inn, and then there's this kid who totally biffed it a few weeks ago on his snowboard and isn't allowed outside, so you can totally borrow it, bro, and just let me know when you get good, yeah?
Love it. It's so random, but...
Yeah. Oh, and then this becomes, Snowboarder 64.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. It's fun. I think it's a lot of fun, and again, I can't wait to see how this is done in the remake. I'm sure they'll blow it out a ton. I can't wait to go down the mountain and with all the different characters. Let me snowboard as Red 13, please.
Yes. Hey, speaking of which, do you remember in Final Fantasy X where they've got to break up the wedding and they're all just sliding down on these cables? And Tidus I get, right?
Right.
And he's all fancy and he's flipping around.
But
frickin' Lulu in her dress made of belts. That was awesome.
Yeah. Give me all that. So, as whatever as it may be, it's because it's Final Fantasy, it works. And you snowboard down the mountain, and it's a whole lot of fun. And again, just remembering ourselves back in 1997, we never played anything like that. Video games didn't really do that. Just now you're playing this game, but in a totally different style than you were before. It was really cool. So,
so not only does Final Fantasy swap between speculative fiction genres, it also swaps between gameplay genres.
Right. It's the reason why it connected with so many people. It's just all the stuff. They were like, let's just give them all the stuff. So you go down the hill. There's a long dungeon you can run through and find materia and fight a lot of interesting monsters and all that stuff. Eventually, you end up at the northern crater. There's this really great cinematic move. I feel like it's been a little while since we've talked about, again, the camera movements of, the PlayStation 1. But it was amazing to see stuff like this back in the day, because you just wouldn't, even going back to Final Fantasy 6 or something like Tactics, these things with 2D kind of ISO, viewpoints. And then you've got Cloud walking up to the edge of this crater, and the camera sweeps from behind him and up over his shoulder to reveal this enormous crater with another smaller hole in the ground, kind of like a volcano, with, instead of lava or something coming out of it, this green and white light swirling all around it. And it's just... I've often said one of the great things that Final Fantasy can do is give you I've never seen anything quite like that before in my life, experience. And this was one of those, especially back in 1997. It was like, whoa.
And it's got the Aurora Borealis in the background and the night sky, and yes, it's got that kind of geyser vortex of, I assume it's live stream, right?
Yeah.
And this is the scar left on the planet by the calamity from the sky, Jenova.
Yeah, and Cloud remarks that Sephiroth takes this energy, and that's what he's doing, right? That's why he's trying to summon Meteor with the black materia so he can strike another wound into the planet, create more of these life stream bursts. He'll suck up all of the energy and turn himself into a god, basically, by being the most powerful being in the world. And so you start heading down, and again, the viewpoint that it gives you as you start walking down into the crater, for just the scope of it, it's something else, man. It really gives you the sense of you are this tiny little person in this enormous crater that has another crater inside of it.
Yeah, it really does a good job of presenting the scope of the issue, and that what Sephiroth wants to do is even bigger. That's that's. I mean, I think that goes to drive home the enormity of what it is our characters are trying to stop in this world.
There's a moment here as you actually enter into the dungeon part of it, where no matter what your party is, if you don't have Tifa in your party, she'll show up and say, "Hey, I feel like we're getting close to Sephiroth. I want to go along. He's done so much to me. I need to be here for this." So it's something where both Cloud and Tifa, you can decide who the third person is in your party, but for what's coming up, you need both of those people around.
And as you're going along, you start seeing these people we've seen before, the folks in black robes, right? Presumably these are some of the ones we've seen before being drawn to the North Crater for some reason. I wonder if that will be explained soon. And some of them are just like keeling over as they're approaching, like they're just dropping dead.
Some of them like off of cliffs and stuff.
Yeah, like are they slipping and falling or throwing themselves off the cliffs?
Right.
We know that Sephiroth thinks that when people die, especially by his hand, that they're just feeding into his power.
Right.
Maybe that's part of it.
Right. So then we get this pretty abrupt edit and transition.
Yeah. Hey, look up there.
Suddenly we're aboard an airship, and we see Rufus, Scarlet, and Heidegger. So not good. It's not
super gross.
Yeah, the sort of most ruthless aspect of the Shinra Empire, right? And Rufus is doing the evil villain monologue of, "I've done it. I have found the promised land." He even has this great line to show what a daddy's boy, daddy issues person he is when he says, "Sorry, old man, I found it first." This just like you're like dad, you're glad your dad got murdered by Sephiroth so that you could fulfill his dream of what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, his father was President Shinra.
That probably
I imagine that has something to do with
it.
I gotta say, it amazes me sometimes how frickin' lucky you and I are to have had the parents
I know, right?
Like, they weren't perfect, but they were pretty darn great. And yeah, neither of us turned into Rufus. So,
so there you go. It's a good call. Or any other sort of autocrat with massive parental issues. So
right.
But then we get this pan back to the back of the airship. And I find this pairing really interesting, by the way, that Hojo is standing there also evil monologuing, but under his breath even more eviler than Rufus, right? In the back.
Right.
I do like that Rude is standing there, guard, not saying anything, but just it appears to be his job in this particular moment to guard Hojo, who probably can't defend himself, or whatever. But I really appreciated that. We're just getting this kind of collection of villains that we haven't seen Rude and Hojo really in the same place before. And you go, oh yeah, it would make sense that if he was coming along for a mission, he might just be assigned to guard the doctor. And he'd be like, yeah, okay. And in Hojo's monologue, he says, "That land is no one's. It's where the reunion will take place. They will all gather here. I wonder if we'll see Sephiroth."
Yeah.
And it's, and again, I guess because we were just thinking about kaiju movies. We just watched King of the Monsters not too long ago, but it kind of reminds me of somebody who's basically sitting there going, yeah, let's see how many people the monster's going to kill. Like, he's just fascinated by whatever's going to happen here, no matter how horrible it might be.
Right.
He is... it's interesting because I feel like we're about to be presented with this question. They're really about to ask out loud, who is the villain of this game? This is a debate that's been going on for 20 years now. Is it Jenova? Is it Sephiroth? Who's really pulling the strings here? I've always been like, it's Hojo. So back on the ground, our heroes continue closer to the center of this crater. And as they do, Sephiroth appears, or at least we think it's Sephiroth, but we're getting a clearer understanding now that that's maybe not what's been going on here the whole time. Every time we've seen Sephiroth, right? Okay, so let me just go through. So what happens next is this version of Sephiroth, like, just slashes a couple of these hooded beings for fun, I guess. Again, maybe he's, like you said, adding souls to the live stream, okay. But then it disappears. And then we just get dialogue over the screen. So disembodied voice, I guess, or disembodied voices, because it says, "Our purpose is to deliver the black materia to our master." Cloud says, "Our," which holds all kinds of meaning, right? He could just be asking, who is our, who are you? Who are you, they? But who are we? Am I you? Am I our? Am I they?
Might be.
It's a loaded one-word question from Cloud. But the disembodied voice continues, "Those who carry Jenova's cells." And they start to fade out, and Sephiroth appears again and pulls off his, like, signature move, apparently, appearing from above the team, slashing down on them just like as he did against Aerith. But I guess because it's the whole party, he couldn't just impale one person. He had to slash at everybody, so no one's killed, but everyone's momentarily wounded and shocked and knocked to the floor. And then a battle commences, but not with Sephiroth.
No, with Jenova.
Right.
Again, and this is not the first time this has happened. Remember on the ship, we thought we were about to fight Sephiroth? No, we fought Jenova. It's like, did he throw a piece of Jenova's arm at us? It's not clear, right?
Right.
Yeah, this has happened a couple times where we think we're about to throw down with Sephiroth, but instead we're fighting Jenova. And I wonder if maybe that's not just RPG, JRPG shenanigans, right?
Right. It's funny because, I remember back in the day thinking, like, this is just weird and I'm not getting it and I'm not understanding it. And this is a reminder that it's okay as long as you explain it well eventually. And right here, they don't do the whole thing, but it becomes clear that you've never actually been fighting Sephiroth, that you've been fighting pieces of Jenova that are taking the form of Sephiroth to mess with you, particularly Cloud, obviously, right?
Right. Because Cloud is also connected.
Right.
Sephiroth, or whatever version of Sephiroth this is, even has a line where it's like, yeah, you know what, you're right. This is the end. This body's no longer useful to me, or something along those lines.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, there's multiple bodies for Sephiroth. Is it his consciousness? Is it only Jenova?
Right.
Not entirely clear yet, but things are becoming clearer.
And so it's clear that, we haven't been encountering, like, the same physical, that the Sephiroth we've been chasing this whole time has not just been an alive human being who we can't quite catch up to. Right?
Right.
That's not what this chase has been about.
And I was asking the question earlier, and I knew the answer, but it was like, but Sephiroth doesn't wear a black cloak with a hood. He wears a long black jacket, and he's got very obvious silver hair. Why do we keep thinking, like, why do we keep mixing up Sephiroth with whomever these people in the black cloaks are? And because they also are connected to Jenova for whatever reason.
Right. And can take that form, and then can take the form of Jenova and fight us. So because we are a good RPG party and we've leveled up properly and have our materia equipped, we defeat Jenova, or this part of Jenova. Clearly, Jenova cells and parts of her can break off and kind of have their own willpower and all of that. And we fought off several versions of them. And then Cloud, remarks, Jenova cells. That's what this is all about. Yeah. The Jenova reunion. this is now where we get, again, a little bit of clarity on this word, which is intrinsically tied to Final Fantasy VII, the word reunion. We don't get the full theory here, but we're basically witnessing it, right? That all of these people with Jenova cells injected into them are reuniting back here at the Northern Cave. And then, as you're kind of trying to wrap your head around that, again, Tifa gives this. So this whole time it wasn't even Sephiroth that we've been after, which is a great question that they don't even immediately give and the answer to, right? It's just like, and again, she has this half a sentence where she says, but Sephiroth is ... And I assume she was about to say dead.
Right.
Because she was there. But
right.
She stops herself from saying it because she still doesn't want to screw with Cloud's head too much, or maybe not right at this moment. So that was interesting. And then to kind of really give us the biggest piece of information that we need, Cloud sums it all up by saying the real Sephiroth is just beyond here.
And how does he know that? Did he just have a clarity of vision?
Right. Right. Or is he maybe being reunioned
right.
a little bit here?
This, some of the cellular memory.
Right.
After he's been experimented on, perhaps.
He even has this weird line where he says, it, and I'm not even entirely sure what he's referring to. It's releasing a powerfully strong will from deep within the planet's wound. Jenova, Sephiroth, the planet itself. Either way, it appears Cloud is just being powerfully pulled to deep within
right.
the planet's wound.
And then he picks up, Drew.
Yeah.
The black materia. It's right there.
Right, after, I guess it was dropped by the portion of Jenova that you just beat. So after all the trauma of having handed the black materia over to Sephiroth unwillingly, or at least unwittingly, I guess, now you've got it back. And they go, okay, we've got it back. Now all we have to do is beat Sephiroth and end this, right?
Right. That feels very endgamey again,
It
right?
does. Even with like the swirling nebulous background, it's like, yeah, this is like the end of a Final Fantasy game. It's just not yet. It's so very not. But I love the way they set you up here. And then there's this really fascinating moment where Tifa suggests that perhaps this time,
yes,
Cloud gives somebody else the black materia to hold on to.
Good call, Tifa. I'm glad someone's got a head on her shoulders in this party.
Yeah, I love that she chooses her moment here. She's not going to mess with his mind and screw with his memories and talk about the Nibelheim incident, but the black materia is right there in Cloud's hands, and last time she watched him hand it over, and she's going, perhaps.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And this is really interesting, too, because then you get to choose.
Let's give it to the trader robot in the castle.
I was going to say, so your choices are Keiichi, who is a traitor who's holding Barrett's daughter hostage, who's already betrayed us once, but then did make a noble sacrifice.
Sort of.
Sort of. At least showing that, as we talked about before, the end goal of saving the planet is probably the same as ours. Then, of course, there's Yuffie, the materia thief.
She likes materia. Give it to her.
Give it to Yuffie. She won't run off with it forever and ever. Then you've got grumpy old man, curmudgeon, arguably abusive husband.
Right.
Sid. The vampire guy you found in the basement.
Former secret agent who used to work for Shinra.
Right. Or lab rat dog.
Or Barrett.
Yeah, give it to Barrett. That's the answer.
I mean, that seems... Yeah, you give it to Papa Bear. That seems like the obviously correct choice.
If I'm doing this in real life, I'm handing the materia to Barrett. I'm saying... And, I think it'd be great, too, again, talk about remake. If you get the option, there could be different scenes for each one, whoever you choose. But there's the potential for like a phenomenal Cloud and Barrett scene at this moment of like, we've been through so much together. We have been giving each other shit this whole time. We really didn't trust each other at the beginning. Then we moved to trusting each other and not liking each other. Then we moved to finding some of the parts of each other we could like. Now dealing with tragedy. We've really become brothers in arms. And now, this most important thing on our journey that has defined what we're out here to do. I can't trust myself with it. You, Barrett, you're my leader. You're the leader of Avalanche. You are the heart and soul of this team. You have been the moral conscience of this whole enterprise. And I trust that you will keep this away from me, keep it in safe hands. One of which is a gun.
It seems, that seems like a good choice. Though I do kind of wonder what would happen if you plugged it into his gun, like you plug other materia into your weapons.
Right. Barrett transforms into a Megazord.
Okay, yeah, you know what? I'm sold. Let's do it.
So then after choosing who to give the black materia to, Cloud and Tifa and one other person of your choice, proceed forward into a bright white light that totally blanks out the screen. And we get 2 lines of dialogue here. And one is just Tifa going, "What the hell?" basically. Which I think is a perfectly reasonable response to complete lack of orientation all of a sudden. And Cloud Ira tells her to calm down.
Yeah.
This is probably a thing of the times and a translation thing. I hope to God in the remake it's something like "don't panic" or "don't worry," or because I think that's what they're trying to get across here. But I couldn't help when I read "calm down, Tifa" to be like, "Ooh, dude, you've really never had a girlfriend before, have you?"
Well, you know how emotional women can be. You know how hysterical they can get. Yeah, that's maybe not a good look. But yeah, a comforting phrase might be nice here.
Yeah.
But also coming from Cloud, like from the man who's had how many different mental breaks between the beginning of the game and now.
Right.
Like, you're going to tell who to calm down?
Get it together, Tifa.
Yeah. Like, Tifa's one of the most grounded people in this story.
Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, I agree that her reaction makes total sense. And I do wonder if Cloud's just being stoic, or if that's meant to be, he's got this sudden clarity for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Is it an effect of that?
Well, whatever clarity he had
Oh, no.
is about to just get absolutely obliterated, because when the white screen fades away and we're getting an image on the screen again, we're back in Nibelheim. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who's reached out to us. Feel free to let us know what we missed, got wrong, or should have mentioned by reaching out to us on Twitter at FFWeeklyPod. You can email us at FinalFantasyWeekly@gmail.com, or you can find us on Patreon for more podcasts and content at patreon.com/FFWeekly. Also, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app totally for free so that you don't miss an episode. Be sure to join us next time when we dive deeper into Cloud's psyche and ask how much any of us truly know ourselves.